Jai Janendra, welcome to everyone. Before I begin this session, I would like to recite the Namokar mantra. Namo Arihantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayaryanam, Namo Uvjayanam, Namo Layes of Sahunam. Welcome again, everyone. I'm glad that a lot of people have joined us today. And I would like to, before we begin the session, I would like to tell you about ancient Jainism. Ancient Jainism is an initiative to spread awareness on Jain history, literature, archaeology, and other related aspects. For this, we organize online sessions which are open to all and they revolve around interesting topics that focus the fascinating aspects of the Jain world. We are very proud to inform you that we have the honor of uh, hosting several eminent scholars like Dr. Hampa Nagaraja, Dr. M.N.P. Tiwari, along with a number of other scholars and students who have done their research on Jainism. To get regular updates, you can follow us on our Instagram page and YouTube channel with the similar name. And today, we have the utmost honor and the pleasure of hosting Dr. Pradeep Chakravarthy. So before we begin, I would like to introduce our speaker, Dr. Chakravarthy, who is an acclaimed author and historian, and he's a graduate of the London School of Economics and JNU Delhi. He has his PhD in history on the roles of the temples in the socio-economic and political life of medieval Tamil Nadu. He has more than 2 decades of experience, especially in learning and development. Dr. Chakravarty's corporate experience aids his consulting on helping individuals and organizations change behavior based on history. His mission is to help people and understand present and future behavior by understanding the past. Um, he presents his insights from Tamil Nadu's history and culture not only in his talks but also in his books. He has authored over 10 books with a focus on culture of Tamil Nadu and how history can help us improve our performance at work. He has more than 200 articles in magazines, newspapers, mostly on history and its relevance to our lives today, in reputed publications like The Lonely Planet, The Hindu, Marg, and exhibitions curated at the India International Center at New Delhi. He also has appeared on Netflix series like Raja Rasoi and Arne Kahaniya, History TV Discovery Channel, and TEDx as an expert in this subject. He has recently opened Anantya in the Village, a heritage hotel in Alvar, Tirunagari. He does heritage immersion tours here for children. Dr. Pradeep is also an ardent speaker, distinguished by a sense of humor, a mellifluous voice, and a deep knowledge about ancient Tamil history and literature. He is here with us today to throw light on the history of Jainism in today's session, History, Art, and Literature, Jain Legacy in Tamil Nadu. Jainism has an extensive history in the Indian state of Tamil Nadu. Although practiced by a minority of Tamils in the contemporary times, the session will explore the fascinating journey of Jainism in Tamil Nadu, covering its history, artistic contribution, and cultural impact, spread and decline, and the contemporary situation in the region. Following the presentation, there will be an interactive Q&A session where the participants can engage with the speaker to deepen their understanding on the subject. I would request the participants, they can also send their questions via the chat box mentioned chat box in this Zoom section. And now, without further delay, I would like to invite Dr. Chakravarthy to enlighten us uh, on the current subject, and I give the floor to him. Welcome, Dr. Chakravarthy. You have to unmute yourself.
Namaskaram. Thank you very much. Saurabh was the one who started me off on this, and I really admire his patience and perseverance in making this happen. I wish to state at the outset that I'm not a practicing Jain. Whatever little I know about Jainism is only through reading books and having conversations with people. And most of the conversations I've had with people have also been mostly Shvetambara Jains, though today's topic will largely be Digambara Jains. So if there are any mistakes, I humbly seek all of you to forgive me for the same. And if there is some merit in whatever I have done, it is because of the many scholars who have come before me. Many of them not Jains, but who have kept their personal religious preferences aside and worked so hard to bring this wonderful community to light. And it's a part of Tamil history that we truly need to know. And I'm very excited that a lot of people have joined today, and Saurabh and this team will do their best to take the contents of this talk into the social media in different ways. Very happy to see Dr. Ajit Das among some of the people who are participating. He's done some wonderful work through Ahimsa Walk. So, those of you who are keen on learning more about Jainism in Tamil Nadu, you should also reach out to him independently and talk to him as well. This image I chose in a way as a representation of how Jainism in Tamil Nadu is today. This is in a small museum in the town of Palangotai, which is in deep down south Tamil Nadu. Many of you may have read recently about how some of the carbon dating in Tamil Nadu has pushed the Iron Age much further back. That site of Shivakala is very close to Palangotai. The tragedy is in this open air museum, a lot of the school children come. They look only at the Tyrannosaurus Rex at the back. They hardly look at this image, this wonderful image of Mahavira in the front. This Mahavira image, thankfully, most of the images in the Palangotai Museum, we don't know where they came from. This one, thankfully, we know is from Alvar Tirunagari, which is the place that I have my heritage resort in. Interestingly, the Vishnu temple there, the main deity is called Adinathar today. And the only proof that we have that there was a large Jain Palli there is the saint of that region, the Hindu saint of that region, Namalvar. In his verse on that town, he mentions the Jains. He's not very happy about the Jains, which is understandable. 7th, 8th century people of Sanatana Dharma, Mimamsa were all fighting very hard against the Buddhists and the Jains. But I'm glad he said what he said, because that shows us his own dating. Otherwise, we wouldn't have known his date as well. And sadly, given the size of this image, the Palli in Alvar Nagari for the Jains must have been a really big one. Nothing of that survives except for this monument, except for this sculpture, which is this Murti who is now in the Palangotai Museum. So, this is really, in a way, the story of Jainism in Tamil Nadu today. Things you will see may be drawn out of context. They may be in places not too many people visit, and they may be in places where people visit a lot more popular things otherwise. My hope in doing this is I've also learned something out of this. So I should thank this team for encouraging me to do this. And my hope is I do a good enough job that some of you at least are persuaded because of this talk to come and see these Jain monuments and these temples in South India. Some of you may also know of some Jain charities which are involved in supporting some of these places financially. Towards the end of this talk, I have a request for you also in specific. So without further ado, let's start this talk. Um, Tirutaka Devar composed the Jivaga Sentamani, which is considered to be one of the finest epics in Tamil literature. It is one of the reasons the existence of this epic also causes Tamil to be seen as a classical language. In the first verse of the Jivaga Sentamani, he has Irai Vanakam or in praise to God. Now you might wonder how God comes up in a Jain text. The Arhat that we talk about in Tamil Nadu is a form of all the Tirthankaras put together in their essence. So that's really the God that Tirthaka Deva is talking about. Let us listen to the verse sung by the very talented and wonderful Kalemamani Sri Sikil Gurucharan. And I will also explain the verse after we've listened to the verse.
மூவா முதலா உலகம் ஒரு மூன்றும் ஏத்த மூவா முதலா உலகம் ஒரு மூன்றும் ஏத்த தாவாத இன்பம் தலையாயது தன்னில் எய்தி தாவாத இன்பம் தலையாயது தன்னின் எய்தி ஓவாது நின்ற குணத்து ஒள்நிதி செல்வன் என்ப ஓவாது நின்ற குணத்து ஒள்நிதி செல்வன் என்ப தேவாதி தேவன் தேவாதி தேவன் தேவாதி தேவன் அவன் சேவடி சேர்த்துமன்றே தேவாதி தேவன் அவன் சேவடி சேர்த்துமன்றே
The meaning of this verse is that I prostrate at the feet of the person who uplifts all the three worlds, who is the very image of all the pleasures, of all the fine qualities, of the person who is the first among all the celestials. To this person, I prostrate myself. And this is how Tirutakadevar starts the Shivaka Sintamani, which is one of Jainism, Tamil Jainism's greatest epics. The image at the bottom is Sitanavasal.
Sir, I would like to just interrupt you a bit. I'm really sorry, but again, your voice is a little low, and there are a lot of participants who are unable to hear. So if you
So
can
this is
please,
better now.
yeah, it's a little better.
Okay. So at the bottom, see the verse that we just. I hope people were able to hear the verse with the audio.
The audio was really loud and clear. It was really
Okay,
like
good.
it was in a
So
really good loud
the
and clear.
wonderful. The meaning of that is Tirthakadevar says he prostrates his feet at the person who uplifts the three worlds, who is the one who is representative of all the pleasures, of all the great qualities, and who is the primary among all the celestial beings. And thus starts Tirthakadevar's great Jain epic, the Sivaka Sintamani. At the bottom is a photo of Sitanavasil, which is a national treasure, if not an international treasure, not just for Jain monuments, but for monuments in general in Indian history. It is very unique because inside there are some acoustic properties as well. This is a cave temple, and there's a small samvasaran in the middle of the second of the cave. And if you can speak in a particular tone, what you speak outside cannot be heard outside, but can be heard inside, and vice versa. So these are the kind of remarkable ways in which the Jains constructed buildings as well. And hopefully during the talk we're going to learn more about this. These are two images of Sitanavasal's paintings. Sadly, these paintings are slowly getting eroded. Even I've been seeing them for the last 20, 25 years, and in my own time, the paintings are fading away. On the left side, you can see a Jain monk who is wading into the water to pluck lotuses. So the whole scene in that part of the ceiling is this is the theme, and you can see the waves are shown by the longitudinal lines. And if you look closely, especially on the right hand side image, you will see wonderful images of carps. Um, These photographs were taken by Swaminathan Natarajan, a very dear friend, and somebody who was very passionately documenting Jain sites not only in Tamil Nadu but in Karnataka as well. And the story of Sittanavasal, in a way, is representative of what we need to do to conserve Jain culture. One part is, of course, to do talks like this to translate more of their Tamil works into English. But the second part and more important one is to conserve these places. So today, slowly, many of these places are becoming more popular for heritage enthusiasts, for walkers, for nature lovers, because they're set in such beautiful surroundings. But that should not come at the cost of destroying the beauty of the place itself. And Sittanavasal's paintings, because of a lot of people going in of the breath, some people also very irresponsibly touch it. Some people very irresponsibly take flash photographs. All of this is destroying these paintings in the even in the 20 years that I've been seeing them. So the hope is talks like this. The good thing is that it brings a lot of awareness, but the not so good thing sometimes is people who, with this awareness, they go to these places and they behave rather irresponsibly. This panel here is from the temple in Vijayamangalam, which is not too far off from Erode. This is an important temple because Erode was on the trade route between the eastern coast and the western coast. Erode district today is very close to the Palghat Pass, which is the one of the few entrances to Tamil Nadu from the eastern sides. And this temple is over there. Fortunately, it's an ASI monument, state ASI monument, very well maintained. Very happy that when I went there, there is a Tamil Jain priest, and there were a whole group of Jains who'd come from Rajasthan, and they were singing and they were praying to the Lord, and they were offering prasad. It was a wonderful sight to see it when I went there. So, like Soumya said, my agenda today is going to give you a general sense of the geography of Tamil Nadu. Won't spend too much of time on this. Some understanding of the landscape of Tamil Nadu before Jainism came. Jainism in Tamil Nadu, the early days we'll look at a little bit, but I'm going to focus mostly on the literature of the Tamil Jains, the temples of the Tamil Jains, and in the end, very quickly, the decline of Tamil Jainism and a little bit about how Jainism is there today as well, with some suggestions on what some of the people here who are involved in Jain foundations, which fund these kind of projects. What are some things that you can also think about? So this is a map of Tamil Nadu, and we need to get a general sense of where most of the Jain monuments are. The majority of the Jain monuments are in Tiruvallur, Kanchipuram, Tiruvannamalai, Viluppuram, Velur districts, Krishnagiri, Dharmapuri to some extent as well, which is all in North Tamil Nadu. In the central part of Tamil Nadu, which is Tiruchirapalli, Karur, Tanjavur, this region, um, it appears that these were places on the banks of the Kaveri River which were patronized a lot more by the Buddhists and the Cholas. Further down south, Pudukkottai, Sittanavasal, which we saw earlier on, is in Pudukkottai district. Pudukkottai, Shivagangai, Virudhunagar, Madurai are very, very popular in Jain, a very, very large number of Jain sites in these places. Tirunelveli, Thoothukudi, Kanyakumari also have some important sites. So if you do like a hot map, the majority of the sites will be in northern Tamil Nadu and in southern Tamil Nadu. Erode, Salem, Namakkal, there will be some sites like the one I showed you in Vijayamangalam, but not many. Uh, we are not sure of when Jainism actually came to South. The general story is that during the time of Chandragupta, who lived between 322 and 298 BC, there was a terrible famine in that region, and his Acharya Bhadrabahu, uh, unable to manage that well via famine and worried about the sacred texts and the sacred oral histories, he moved to Shravana Belagula, and he started living there. And from Shravana Belagula, which is in the Jain inscriptions in Tamil Nadu, they call the Mula Sangha. From there were many embassies that came down, very likely through the Palghat Pass into Tamil Nadu, and then they fanned out in Tamil Nadu. And in Tamil Nadu, we have evidence from about 600 CE, maybe a little older as well. So generally, a lot of the information that we have is around second century onwards. 600 to 8th is when we have a lot of information, but it is very likely that Jainism was already here during the Sangam period, which is the broad timeline on the right side of the slide. Let's move this one. One second. Yeah. So we're talking about 300 BC, 150 to about 100 AD. Uh, the Sangam period was a time when people lived in Tamil Nadu, and at that time, when I'm saying Tamil Nadu, I mean Kerala as well. They lived broadly in 5 different eco zones. So you had the Kurunji, which was the mountainous region. You had the Mullai, which was the forested regions. You had Marudam, which was the fields, the rice fields, the paddy fields. You had Neidal, which was the seashore. And if any of these four regions were starved of water, then they became the Palay or the desert. Now, each of these regions had their own cultures, and in the Tolkappiyam, which we will encounter a little later, which is the first work of Tamil grammar. The poem, the poem goes, மாயோன் மேய காடுரை உலகமும் சேயோன் மேய மைவரை உலகமும் வேந்தன் மேய தீம்புனல் உலகமும் வருணன் மேய பெருமணல் உலகமும் முல்லை குறிஞ்சி மருதம் நெய்தல் என சொல்லிய முறையாறு சொல்லவும் படுமே, which is therefore Mayon Meye Kadure Ulagam. So Mayon or Vishnu was the god of the forest. Seyon was Maivare Ulagam. Seyon is Shiva. He is sorry. So let's do the other one. Vendan Meya Timbuna Lulagamam. Vendan, of course, is Indra, who is from the Marudam landscape. Seyon is Muruga. Seyon Muruga, because Muruga always had his eyes were red, not because he was drunk and bloodshot, but because he was the god of war in ancient Tamil country. So he was a lord of the Kurunji. Vishnu was the lord of the forest. Indra was the lord of the seashore, and Varuna was the lord of the fields, and Pale was Kotrave. Pale came in much later. In the Tolkappiyam, we don't hear about the Pale. This is probably the time that the Jains first came into Tamil Nadu. And it is very likely at that time that each of these eco zones were largely independent of each other, except for occasional trade. So, for example, the mountainous region, one of their biggest trading components, products was honey. And that honey would come down south. For the Marudam region, their biggest trading component would have been curds and milk. So that would have, and rice, that would have flowed down. So this was the kind of trade that happened at that time. By our standards today, we can argue that the Sangam period, life was largely uninhibited in terms of sexual partners and so on. It is very likely that towards the end of the Sangam period, this tradition of how we should live life righteously, that was probably one of the earliest contributions the Jain monks made to Tamil Nadu. Because if you look at the literature of the Jains, uh, the number of texts on right living, right thinking, and right knowledge would far outnumber the number of literary texts. So it's very likely that this was the initial contribution of the Jains to the Tamil society. Then from about 100 CE till 300, 350 CE is what is incorrectly in the old days called the Dark Ages. They're not Dark Ages at all. It just so happens that this was a name given by old historians at that time. This has been largely proved as a myth. But it was called the Dark Ages because in this period from 100 CE to 300, 350 CE, we have no records of what happened in Tamil Nadu historically. The belief is that the Calabras, and there's a lot of controversy on where they came from, but very likely that the Calabras came from somewhere in Karnataka. They moved down south. They conquered what is Kerala and Tamil Nadu today. And they were probably not of the Vedic religion. They would have been Jain or Buddhist. And that period was seen as the Dark Ages because the Vedic religion went into a downfall. But in 350, the Pandya king Kadungon defeats the Kalabras, and he brings Vedic religion back. Not that Jainism and Buddhism disappear after that, they continue. But what happens post 350 is there is a fairly marked decline for Jainism and a very marked decline, in fact, a total absence of Buddhism after that over a period of time. While there are no inscriptions or historical evidences of what happened during the Kalabra period. This is the time that Jain literature and Buddhist literature really flourished. So it would be a misnomer to call it the Dark Ages. In fact, for Tamil Jain literature, the 100 CE to 350 CE would have actually been their golden period. This is our one of our earliest inscriptions from a place called Mangalam. Very, very difficult to climb. I've done this as a young kid. Unlikely that I'll be able to do it again. What does the Mangalam inscription say? So the Mangalam inscription is dated to 3rd century BCE. This is our earliest, so the actual date we can say is not so much 600 CE, but 3rd century BCE is when we can see the earliest references to Jainism. And this is also one of the oldest inscriptions of Tamil script. This is the Tamil Brahmi script. So in that way, it's an important inscription, not just for Jainism, but for Tamil Nadu as well. It basically sent, Kadalan Vaidhi was a worker. So he must have been some kind of an accountant, because the word Panaan is used. He was also related. He was also somehow related or serving under the Pandya king Nedunjayan, and he excavated a stone bed for a Jain monk called Nanda Siri Kuvan. And this is the inscription over there, and there's a small Jain bed. This shows that the Jains were very popular, and they had some kind of royal patronage even in 3rd century BC. This is the time when Sangam period is also happening, trade with Rome is happening, and the possibility is that a little before this time, the Sanatana Dharma tradition was largely focused or dominated by the Mimamsas. So out of the 6 darshanas, Mimamsa was the group which interpreted the Upanishads with a high degree of importance given to rituals. Now, this would have worked well or relatively well for Kshatriyas and Brahmins whose travel was a little less, whose jobs entailed them to be mostly in one place, except for Kshatriyas, of course, when they went to war. But this was very, very difficult for the Vaishya community to follow. And this is an old tradition. So what happens is, Jainism and Buddhism, when they come into their own, they seem to have a closer affinity to the Vaishyas, because one is, in a way, they say, look, you can't manage all these Mimamsa related rituals all the time. Our path is a lot more simpler. Support us and we will help you reach moksha. Because if you look at the fundamental, some of the philosophy, except for the belief in God, the cyclical nature of time, the Shramana and the religions are fairly similar to what the Upanishads say. That seemed to have worked well, which is why a lot of the merchant community across India tended to support Jainism and Buddhism. And I think also there was a sense of, for the merchant community to keep their egos in check, because their gods, their teachers were people who had renounced everything. And in a way, I think that also taught them to be a lot more honorable in business, a lot more less attached to business, a lot more open to how, in the Jain philosophy, this is a Uta Sarpini and Ava Sarpini, so that everything keeps changing. Business also, everything keeps changing. So this kind of a philosophy would have really helped a merchant be a very composed and mature merchant. And the level of focus and attention the Jain texts give to the right way of living life would have also, in a way, helped the merchants develop a very strong, honorable code of ethics. So, in a way, Jainism also benefited from the merchants because of the funds that flowed in, because of the support that flowed in, but it also, no doubt, helped the merchants as well. So, in a way, we could say, if there were people who are doing research on ancient business, Indian business ethics, I'm sure a big reason for that would have definitely been the Jain texts and the Jain philosophy and thought at that point of time. Let's come down to the literature of the Tamil Jains. There's a large list. I'll see how many I can do today. We were already half an hour through, but I'll see how much I can do. So the Tolkappiyam has about 1612 sutras on Ezhuthu, Soll and Porul, which is meaning, words and writing. This is the core grammatical work of Tamil, and this is said to be pre-first century BCE. It is a little contested on whether this was a Jain text or not, but what cannot be contested is that all Jain epics and works, they also follow the Tolkappiyam route. So definitely Jains were aware of this. The Tirukural and Naladiyar, there's a lot of Tirukural, at least there's a lot of contestation whether Tiruvalur was Jain or not. And I remember a very interesting conversation I had with a Tamil scholar who said, Tirukural is like a beautiful little child. Anybody, even a passerby on the road, will not hesitate in pinching the child's cheeks or patting it on its head. That's what Tirukural is. So in a way, he was saying that this was common to everybody. But there are some of the chorals or the couplets have specific references to, say, Vishnu measuring the three worlds. So was it Jain text? Was it a Vaishnava text? We're not really sure. The choral basically has 1330 couplets. They deal with Aram, which is about Dharma, Purul, which is Artha, and Inbam, which is Kama or pleasure. The Naladiyar is a compilation of 400 short verses. Each of them are 4 lines each. They're usually ascribed to Ugra Peruvaldi Pandya or Padumanar, who was a Jain monk. This is very likely a Jain text. Many, many beautiful Naladiyar with extraordinary metaphors. And it's a shame that not too many people learn them today. In fact, one thing that the Jain Foundation should do is to bring out more translations of this and find out ways to bring them into social media so that younger people, whether Jain or not, whether Tamil or not, will be able to learn the wisdom. One of the ones that I learned in school that has stuck with me for a long time is how our friendships with people should be like the waxing and the waning of the moon. So it says that when we are friends with people who don't help us live good lives, our friendship should be like the waning of the moon, that it should slowly go down. But if we are with people who nourish us, who take us to higher levels of existence, who are able to bring more dharma into our lives, then our friendship with them should be like the waxing of the moon. Uh, the 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 next work is called Paramori, which is by Moondurai Ayyanar. And this Ayyanar word is interesting because even today in southern Tamil Nadu, Nainar, Ayyanar are words that you'll see very commonly. All of these people at one point of time are very likely could have been Jains. So the Paramori in Tamil means wise words. So that's what it really is all about. Tiru Malai by Kanimozhiyar is a text on different songs set in the Tinai landscape. Eladi is a portmanteau of words. So Ela is cardamom. Ericaris is wood, which is a very fragrant wood. Then there is Chandanam, which is, of course, sandalwood. Tain, which is honey. And all of these are very fragrant. So the whole of Eladi is about wise words, wise sayings, and all in many fragrant different topics. Nanmani Kadige is, it literally means solver of 4 gems. And this is also a philosophic text on how to live a good life or a dharmic life. This was by Vilambinathar was the person who composed this. Yaperang Viruthi is a commentary on poetry. The Nigandas are dictionaries, and the Jain monks compiled many of these dictionaries. The Divakara Niganda, the Pingala Niganda, the Chudamani Niganda are some of them. Enchuvadi is a text on math, and Jinendra Malai is a very interesting text. It is a medicine text on for humans and for animals. And one pattern that you can see in ancient Jain pallis, um, most of them are in very remote areas, but in all of them, they were very freely giving uh, medical help for the local people, a sanctuary for people who are persecuted by politics or whatever it was. And they also had education. In fact, the word palli in ancient Tamil Nadu in the inscription stands for Jain monasteries. And in a way, today, it's the same word that we use for schools in Tamil as well. And there's a good chance that we call a school a Palli today because Jain Pallis always were connected with education. Now we will come to the literature part. Jivaka Sentamani, of course, is the magnum opus for the Jains. It is the story of Jivaga. It was written by Tirthakadeva. It has 13 Ilambagams or chapters and about 3,145 stanzas, all of it in Tamil. So I'll give you the story very briefly. I'm reliably informed, apparently, that Amar Chitrakatha had a comic on Jivaka Sintamani some time back. So there is a coup in the palace and the king dies. The pregnant queen, she escapes in a flying machine which is shaped like a bird. And in the forest somewhere, she gives birth to Jivagan. And then she renounces the world and becomes a nun. We don't hear anything about her after that. The rest of the story is about this young boy, Jivagan, who is the embodiment of the perfect person, perfect man. So Jivagan then uh, goes into he goes back to stake his claim to the kingdom. He marries many different people, and then finally he finds that joy is not in all the Sringara rasa, in having these dalliances with so many women, in managing a kingdom. He says finally the true peace comes only when he embraces the path of the Tirthankaras and he finally becomes a Jain monk. This is the story of Jiva Sintamani. It is said that the Tirthakadeva wrote the Jivaka Sintamani as a response to the Sanatana Dharma people at that time, who taunted him and Jains in general to say that Jains were all monks. They couldn't write any literature about Veera Rasa and Shringara Rasa, which is love and bravery. And it's in response to that that Tirthakadeva wrote it. Even till the 1900s, in Tamil Jain communities, if they wanted a marriage to happen in the house, they would organize for readings of the Jivaka Sintamani. So this is clearly one of our most important texts. Sadly, the Valayapati we know nothing about. It is a Jain text. It's also one of the 5 epics of Tamil literature. We have, and very tantalizingly, the savior of Jain Tamil literature can be said to be Uve Saminath Iyer. And we'll learn more about him later on. In one of his one of his pages in his autobiography, he talks about how when he was a young student, he saw a copy of the Valayapati in the manuscript library of the monastery that he was studying in. But later on, when he started embarking on this journey of tracking down Jain epics and publishing them, he couldn't find that manuscript. So even within our own eyes, of course, Saminatha Iyer lived many 4-5 generations back, but even in a way in our own lifetimes, we've lost this really precious epic. The Silappadigaram, many people assign it to Jains. I personally, as a historian, and I'm sure Jains might have an objection to this, but I personally feel this is not a Jain epic, because the only evidence of Jainism in Silappadigaram is when the hero and the heroine Kannagi and Kovalan, they meet Kaundi Adigal on the way to their passage to Madurai. And the structure of the epic there, actually, the way the dialogues go for Kaundi Adigal, it looks like Ilongo Adigal was probably closer to Buddhism or Hinduism than to Jainism. But the story of the Silamba is the key, 3 key aims of writing the Silappadigaram are very connected to Jainism as well. So the 3 aims are that one is that the king who deviates from the path of Dharma will surely face catastrophe. Number 2, even if evil deeds and thoughts are unintended, then also karma will come into operation. People will suffer even though they didn't intend to have that evil thought or deed. And the third is that a chaste woman is adored by all human beings and by the deities themselves. This is the story of Silappadigaram. Yashodhara is kavya on how we can have ahimsa in thought. Dravya himsa is the word for it, and bhava himsa. So it's a whole combination between is it in thought or it should be in action that ahimsa should be. And I'm reminded of a wonderful play that I think Girish Karnad adapted it from some other older play, maybe Yashodhara. where there is a Jain queen who is married to a Hindu king, and they don't have a child for a long time. So the Hindu mother-in-law says that the only way a child can be born is by doing a yajna. And in the yajna, a sacrifice has to be given, not a human sacrifice, of course, but an animal sacrifice. And the queen is horrified because in the Jain philosophy, in the Jain way of life, even thinking of violence is equal to committing violence. So that whole play is a very interesting dialogue on how what is violence. Is thinking about violence, or is the physical act of it violence? So very hard hitting play, and I'm sure, I believe the core of the idea was from Yashodhara. Chudamani is by Tola Moritevar, and this is very similar to the Jivaka Sintamani. The Sri Purana is in Manipravala, which is a combination of Tamil and Sanskrit, in Tamil and Sanskrit as well. This is based on the Mahapurana, and it's about not just the 24 Tirthankaras, but the 12 Chakravartins, the 9 Balabhadras, the 9 Vasudevas, and the 9 Prativasudevas. And if you calculate the total number, it will come to 63. So when the Shaiva texts during the decline of Jainism, when the Shaiva texts were creating the Nayanmar concept, I think they chose a 63 to mirror this, these 12 Chakravartins and 9 Balabhadras and all that, because all of this comes to 63. The Nayanmars also come up to 63. The Tirukalambagam is a work in poetry as a response to a very important Jain epic, a Buddhist epic called Kundalakesi. Sadly, we don't have the Kundala. We don't have the Kundala. Sorry, this is Neelakesi, is that one. So sadly, we don't have Kundalakesi anymore. But through Neelakesi, we know something about Kundalakesi, which is a Buddhist epic which we've got. The Tirukalambagam is a general poetry on reply to Buddhist thoughts and Buddhist arguments. And then we have Perangadai, which says that it's a large story. That's what it means in Tamil. This is from the Kongu region. It's about a Jain king called Udayanam. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Uve Saminadayar was the first person to publish the Perungadai. And in the Perungadai, there's a very interesting part where he talks about the heroine who is playing a ball game. And in those days in ancient Tamil country, any games connected with balls women were very good at it, whether it was volleyball, throw ball, or whatever it was. And in the Perangadai, Kanchanamala is the name of the lady. And she is throwing up one ball, and then she's throwing up another one. The second one hits the first ball, and then she's throwing up some 1,000 balls like this. All of them are hitting each other in the sky. And then she's able to catch all of them as they fall down. And as they fall down, she's able to juggle up with them as well. And then he talks in that about how their collyrium is discolored, their hair is all tossed up, their jewelry is tossed up. A very lyrical description of how women were very capable and physically fit to play very tough ball games in those days. The last text is the Tirunutran, which is on Neminathar, and this was composed in Mylapore. So for those of you who've been to Chennai, you must have heard of the Kapalishwara temple in Mylapore. It's very sure that the Kapalishwara temple did not exist where it is today. The old Kapalishwara temple was demolished by the Portuguese. The Santon Church came in its place, and the stones, in fact, some of them are still in the Bishop's Museum, the Bishop's Palace. This is the new Kapalishwara temple. And Neminathar, who was a very, very important Jain saint for Tamil Jainism, lived in Mylapore. And this Tirunutrandadi is a set of verses, 400 verses on Neminathar. So there's a broad sense of the literature of the Jains. Sadly, many of these have not been translated into English, or they have been translated to English by academics. Very, very difficult for ordinary people to read. Certainly very difficult for non-Jains to read and get a sense. So with reels and social media and Instagram and Facebook and YouTube becoming so popular, it'll be wonderful to have short, 3-minute, 4-minute episodes on important things from each of these. So it'll be wonderful if some Jain Foundation can actually do a whole series of 400 shots on YouTube on the Naladiya. Right? You take one Naladiya and you explain the meaning in about a minute. It'll be a very, very engaging thing to listen to. and the words of the Naladiyar are timeless. Tirukural, of course, thankfully, is very well received. A lot of people know about it. It's been translated. Paramuri, Naladiyar, not at all translated. In fact, that way, these texts can be a little luckier because there will be some Jains who will do this. But at the same time, I can do a similar talk of similar list of Buddhist texts. And for that, we have no Buddhism in India anymore. So it's very difficult to even find a sponsor for that. But just like this Paramari for Jains, there is something called Paramari Nanura, which is very similar to Naladiyar for Buddhists as well, also in Tamil. So this is hopefully will give you a broad sense of all the variety of texts that we have from Tamil Jains, in both literature, in philosophy, in right living, in mathematics, in medicine. And this is just a small exam set that I've given you. And one hopes that there will be funding and interest in bringing a lot of these to the modern generation as well. Now let's go on a bit of a travel journey across different spots in Tamil Nadu. How are we doing on time? We end at 8, right? Sorry, Deepa, you're on mute. So I'll, Soumya, Saurabh, can I get a sense of how much more time we have? Are they on mute? Are they chatting with me?
Around 10 to 15 minutes. There is no limit, sir. You can continue. You can continue.
Okay, but I'll keep it a little shorter because I have audience interest also might flag. Valli Malai is a cave temple near Vellore. This was built around 877 to 907 by Rajamala II, who was the son of Rana Vikrama and the grandson of Sri Purusha. There is a very strong Rashtrakuta connection to this place, the Western Gagga kings of Talakad. The image of Devasena is said to be the pupil of Baba Nandi, who was the Rajaguru for one of the kings of the Bana kings. And a very tough climb, but very, very scenic from there. And then, of course, you can see a Yakshi on the side. Usually in Jain images in Tamil Nadu, you always find a Yakshi close by as well. So that's Valli Malai. Let me move on. Tiruchirapalli Kundram, of course, is the must-see if you like paintings. Very, very accessible. It's in Jina Kanchi in Kanchipuram. And I put this photograph of this old lady who sadly passed away now. Her name was Padma Gandhi, and her father was a very respected Jain teacher and scholar. And the house that she lived in, all run down by the time I saw her about 10, 15 years back. It used to be the Jain school, and people who visited it about 20, 30 years before me, they said that there were rooms and rooms which was stacked with palm leaf manuscripts. I don't know whether they're all still there, but wonderful lady she was, took care of this temple in a very, very devoted way. And as you can see, Tirupati Kundram almost looks like a Hindu temple, but it has wonderful paintings inside. Sadly, the old Pallava or the Chola paintings were all painted over by the Vijayanagara period, but nevertheless, they are very, very high quality. In Tirupati Kundram, we have inscriptions from about 1116 from Kulothunga Chola's time. But in the Pallankoil plates, from the Pallava period, we know that there was a temple here, and there was a lot of land transactions over here, and the local village lakes at one point in time belonged to the temple. And there was also very interesting inscription here. Let me just go through that. Yeah, from 1362, when Irugappa, who was the son of General Vaitya, he built the front mandapa, and he was a general in the Vijayanagara period. So from the Pallava Chola period, right up till the Vijayanagara period, Tirupati Kundram was patronized. Very beautiful paintings. This painting of Tirupati Kundram deserves a separate talk. Fortunately, the paintings have been well documented. The Madras Museum has published a very excellent book on this, and there are some other books as well. Next, let's move on to Siyamangalam. Siya, it's incorrectly pronounced as Siyamangalam, but the correct pronunciation is Siyamangalam. Singa is a lion, and Mangalam is a place where Brahmins live. So Singa Mangalam becomes Siya Mangalam. There is a very beautiful Pallava cave temple very close to this Vijendragiri is what this hillock is called. And that has South India's first Nataraja in stone. Not too many people visit that temple. Very few other people visit this temple as well. My hope is when you go and see this place, the hill Vijayadri is what the hill is called in inscriptions. The hill continues to be so unspoiled. I hope some foundation which is supporting Jain monuments, they don't put up a covered pathway, they don't cover up the hill in some way. When I went much earlier on, even these concrete steps weren't there, but now they become quite, and you can see they're quite ugly actually. Um, some of the earliest inscriptions in Siyamangalam are from 892 CE from Rajamalla II. The hill was called Vidyadri, and it was for Arungal Anavayan, which is a school for Jain monks. And in the 10th century, the steps were excavated by Vajranadi Yogindra. And he was the Mandalacharya, must have been some kind of an abbot for Arungal Anvaya. Of course, those steps are not these steps, they must have been a little older. So that's Siyamangalam. The grandest temple of Jains in Tamil Nadu would definitely be Tirumalai near Ranipet. It's multiple temples from the base of a hill right up to the top, and towards the top is this fantastic statue of a standing Tirthankara. Inside the temple, there is a very strong likelihood that this painting here is of Jwala Malini, one of the Yakshis. It's very likely that this painting originally had Chola paintings in the back, because we have several inscriptions in this temple. I mean, this temple deserves a separate talk again. In 1881, the Bhattaras accepted some gold from one of the Rashtrakuta kings. In 958, also there was a similar gift. The Chandraprabha temple and has many inscriptions which call it Vaige Malai or Vaigavur. In 1006, Rajaraja's time, a monk built a sluice for the local community. So you can see how Jain monks were continuing to support the welfare of the local community, because building a sluice meant more land came under cultivation, farmers got better harvest, and therefore they earned the gratitude of these farming community. Um, this place in 1024 is a very interesting and important inscription, where this place was called Kundavai Jinalayam. Kundavai was a sister of Rajaraja Chola, and if it was called after her, she must have made some very large contributions to the temple. Um, there are inscriptions of how people from Karnataka came and gifted gold and land and a large metal gong to the temple. Arhasagiri was the image that you can see over here. This was set up by a Vanji king. Vanji is normally what is Kerala and Karur, that region today. Chitrameli Periya Natar was an agricultural guild of merchants. In 1344, they gave some gifts to the temple. Then in 1349, a Sambhuvarayar dynasty, which came much later than the Cholas, a lady called Nalla Tal, she gave some donations to this temple. In 1445, a large fish pond was given, and whatever fish were were harvested from there, that right and that money was given to this temple. There are many other places, many other references to inscriptions over here. Lovely paintings, very beautiful sculptures. If there is one grand Jain temple that you have to see in Tamil Nadu, I would suggest you go to Tirumalai. Tiru Nar Kundram is, we don't have too much of time, but I'll talk about it very quickly. The Moolavar is Appandaya Nadar, and it's a bas relief of Parshvanath in Kayot Sarga. And the main deity has a bas relief of Sri Parshvanath in standing posture. There is a five-hooded snake behind him as well. I've not have taken a photograph of that. And there is also a cave here before the Jinalaya, which has stone beds for monks. In the inscriptions, we hear that the temple was maintained during the three rulers and their officers of the Chola, Pandya, and Vijayanagara period. Rajaraja the first, Rajendra the first, Kulotunga the first, they all gave the gifts. So this is all lamps that were given to the temple. And the place was at that point of time referred to as Rajaraja Valanate Tirumunaippadi Tiru Narungondai. This was the name of the place that it was called at that point of time. And in his 13th year, 13th year, Rajaraja recorded a large lamp given to the Yakshi shrine, which is very close by from here. And it also looks like some of the sculptures in this temple were bought from other Jain temples close by. Maybe they were destroyed, maybe they were dilapidated. So Tiru Nar Kundram, also not too far off from Ranipet. In fact, you can stay in Ranipet and visit a lot of Jain Pallis very close by. Kuyil Kudi is near Madurai. It's even today it's called Samanar Malai. Very beautiful lotus pond at the foot of the hills, and then a Jain temple on the top. The top is quite difficult to get to, but to the side is a shorter climb, and there's a wonderful image, bas relief again of one of the Tirthankaras. Chitral is one of the most remote cave temples to Jains. This is in the Kanyakumari district. Even in the 10th century, today it's called a Bhagavati temple, but in the 10th century, this Bhagavati was called a Yakshi, and she was called Varasundari, and there were many offerings. In fact, there were more offerings given to the Yakshi than to the Jain temple over here. Which you can see are these bas reliefs. At a later period in the Vijayanagar period, these were all they were mandapams that were erected in the front. Otherwise, they were all open to the sky. In 1373, there was a person called Danana Chetty Nainar. His female line were conjoined to give turmeric to the Bhagavati temple on a regular basis. The many other inscriptions on Chitral. And some of them are still unknown. So this is a small video I'd like to show you of a Jain cave called Ayanar Kulam, which is near Seran Mahadevi, not too far off from the homestay that I run. You get a sense of how desolate the landscape is. Let me just do a video here. You can see how desolate the landscape is. As you keep walking up behind the tree, you will see a little hill. And this is the hill on this side, and there's a very well hidden from the road or from the path, I should say. There's a small Jain, there's a small cave and a Jain rock bed over there. So many of these are still unknown. Trichy, of course, is a place that everybody will recognize. I put Trichy over here because in the 7th century, there is a inscription which uses the word Chira, and it's very likely, and Chira probably was the Salekana vow that Jains take. It is very likely that this Chira Nonbu was the origin for the word Tiruchirapalli. So these are some interesting temples of Jains that I wanted to show you. Some information on some of the important inscriptions. And many. I've just taken a few. Let me just go through that one by one. So in 799 in Erwadi is again a small village today near Tirunelveli, and it's just got a very small Jain image now. But there was an important temple there, and the interesting inscription is from the time of Maran Jadayan, who was a Pandya king, and he says this large gift was given as a Palli Chandam or a gift to the Jain temple, but the local Brahmins had to look after it. So it was a little unusual inscription. The Avarni is a small village in the Tanjore area. In 1193, there was an inscription on how land was swapped from a Hindu temple and a Jain Palli. It was a very interesting inscription. Sendalai, there's a very interesting inscription on Palli Chandam, which is a Jain land grant, where taxes were waived. And it says that there was a large fair area or a large lake that itself belonged to the Jain Palli. I believe that the Palli doesn't exist now, but the inscription does. Tirunageshwaram from the time of Aditya the First is a Chola king, 900 CE. There's a very interesting inscription on how the Jain Palli was renovated, and there was a Tiruchirapalli or a corridor on the four walls against the outer walls of the temple. This was constructed, and a gopuram was also constructed in the Miladu Udayar Palli. This is the name of the Jain temple. I don't know whether this still exists. Jambukeshwaram, of course, a very famous called Tirvaneka, very famous temple on the island of Srirangam. 1233, there's a Rajaraja, the first inscription, which mentions a Jain Palli and a land grant given to the Jain temple, but in the Shiva temple. So This gives you a broad sense of how there are, one is that there are many other Jain sites with very interesting inscriptions, and how there is a fairly broad pattern in many times where kings used to stay in a Shiva temple and give a land grant to a Jain temple as well, and maybe vice versa as well. Maybe that was the way for the kings to also bring the Jains and the Hindus together, because both of them fighting against each other would have caused a lot of headache for the kings, and especially if the Jains were supporting traders and the Brahmins were supporting the land tillers. Those are the two income streams for the king. It either tolls through the trade or tax through agriculture. He certainly didn't want, at least a smart king wouldn't have wanted these two communities, these two religions to fight with each other. So difficult times for the Jains start from about the 6th century. There's a rise in the Bhakti movement. There is a greater awareness among the people who are not Jain or Buddhist that it was not just the Mimamsa school, there were also other schools of looking at Jainism. Bhakti was more important. Bhaj is the root word for Bhakti, which means service. And it was service to God, it was service to people who service God, which was important. No doubt, some parts of the Bhakti movement was inspired by Jain philosophy as well. But it becomes very, very pronounced in the 7th century onwards. Now, at this point of time, we don't really know what happened, but it's very likely that the Buddhists opposed this militarily and they were completely exterminated. I mean, there's no Buddhist, practicing Buddhists of the old school today. Most of the Buddhist texts have vanished. Buddha viharas have either been converted into Hindu temples, very rarely that too, or they've been completely destroyed. Jains, I think, were a lot more smarter. They seem to have some kind of a truce with the Bhakti movement, with the Hindus, and said, "Look, you do your thing, we'll do our thing," and they lived very quietly. Which is why all the way till the 1880s, 1890s, when Uwe Saminadar was living in Kumbakonam, he was able to go to a couple of streets behind the Ramaswamy temple and find that there were Tamil Jains still living there. They were still causing the Jivaka Sintamani to be sung in public, and Uvesa was profited by that. So there are many stories in the Shaiva tradition of what happened to the Jains and how the Jains declined. One of them is remembered in Madurai even today, and I think I should talk about that a little bit. So at one point of time and this is celebrated in the Avani festival in the Meenakshi Amman temple. You can just see that the temple priest is honoring the Oduvar, and the Oduvar is the chanter of the Devaram hymns in Tamil. And the story that the Oduvar chants is as follows: the Pandya king had come under the influence of Jain monks living around the hills of Madurai, and there were many of them. And this perturbed the queen Mangair Karasi a lot, who was a former Chola princess, and her minister Kulacharayan. So they're very upset about this. And the two invited Samandar, who was a very important Shaiva Bhakti poet. And Samandar is a young boy. He's from the 7th century. Very, very young boy. He comes to Madurai to counter the Jain monks. And the Jains set fire to Samandar's dwelling. But Samandar, through his verse, he says, "Let the fire not harm my dwelling. Let the fire instead go and reduce the Jain Pallis to ashes." And sure enough, that's what happens. And then the Jains very unsuccessfully try to cure the stomach illness and the hunchback of the king through their peacock feathers, through their medicines, and through their chants and prayers. But none of this works. And finally, Samandar is able to cure the king by just chanting the Om Namah Shivaya mantra and by applying the sacred ash. And the king is now completely recovered. There are some further stories where the Jains and the Samandars have a very bitter debate on whose religion is better. And there are two tests that are conducted. One is test by fire, and the other is test by water. The fire burns up the Jain manuscripts, but it does not burn up Samandar's Shaiva manuscripts. The water dashes away the Jain manuscripts. It brings back Samandar's manuscripts. And because of, so there are two parts of the story. Because of this humiliation, the Jains voluntarily impale themselves, which is the scene that you see over here. And in others, they say that the Pandya king, he impaled the Jains. So the story is very popular in Shaiva traditions. But interestingly, the Jain epics or the Jain stories don't talk about this impalement. Surely, if there were so many Jains impaled, and then there's another story that this was all in retaliation because the Jains had conspired with the king to impale the Shaivas much earlier on. But whoever impaled whoever, this is a story that we hear only from about the 12th, 13th century. We don't hear it from the Jain stories at all. And this is surprising because if so many of their community members were impaled, one would imagine that they would have some record, some story of this, but we don't have. So it's very likely that this was a story, this whole impalement came much later. But this tradition, this memory of this antipathy towards the Jain, it continues to be remembered even today. Sadly, this painting that you see has been painted over in Madurai. There is another painting in Tirupura Marudur, which is further down south, where there is still a mural of the Jains being impaled. But in a way, this kind of brings us to the situation today. Um, most Jain sites are largely off the tourist circuit, and I would argue this is for the better because somehow tourist sites tend to become heavily overpopulated, heavily built up. But for those who are willing to responsibly travel to the sites, it's the Pune Jain Sangh, and you can see in the left hand side this picture with this little yellow shape. The Jain Sangh has done a fantastic job. Every site, however tiny, I mean, there is a between the Thuthukudi airport to Alvarthanagari to my homestay. There's one site like this. Yendal is the place that it's called. It's a tiny, tiny spot where there are two rather dilapidated Jain Tirthankara images. Even something like that has been documented by this Jain Sangh. So really, a lot of credit goes to them for literally putting Jain sites in Tamil Nadu on the map. But one hopes that that these Jain sites are now slowly receiving a lot of financial funding from North Indian Shvetambara Jain communities. Pundi, for example, as a Jain temple, and the tragedy, and this is my prayer to Jains in this group who are living in different parts of the world, who are keen on financially supporting Jain institutions in Tamil Nadu. Please respect the local design culture. The sad part is very well-intentioned Jains, they bring a lot of marble statues and granite statues carved in the West Indian style into Tamil Nadu. This should not be done. We should keep the traditional Tamil milieu of carving, the Tamil style of carving the Jain images, and the Tamil way of decorating the Jain temples in Tamil Nadu. This should be maintained. This should be preserved. The other person who Tamil Jains and Jains in general have to thank is this man on the right side, Uwe Saminath Iyer. Saminath Iyer was a deep scholar and a very devoted Shaivite. But when it came to his research, he did not let his passion for Shaivism overpower his passion for scholarship. If not for this one person, so many of the Jain texts that we have today, so many of the Buddhist texts that we have today, so many of the Sangam, all the Sangam literature that we have today would not have been there. Because this man single-handedly worked to get all these from different places. And remember, at that time, all these Jain works were not stored with Jain people, they were all with Hindu people, poets. And he got it from so many different places, from monasteries, Hindu monasteries, from poets. And he was the one who edited it. There were so many of them had careless mistakes. He was the one who published all of it. And in his book, En Charitram or My Story, in the book that I and Justice Prabhasri Devan, we co-translated Essays of Uvesa. These are the books that have many, many essays and accounts of how much he suffered to bring these Tamil Jain, Tamil Buddhist, and indeed Tamil Sangam period texts back into fashion, back into publication. And we really owe him a great debt of gratitude. So these are a few things that I wanted to say. And also, there are some hidden Jain clues that you may not find anywhere else. The Velala community, the Pillevmars in the Tirunelveli region, Today, many of them have puja rooms like this on the left side with a lot of Hindu gods and ancestor pictures and all that. But when I was growing up, when I was in my 10s and 20s, when I went to Saiva Pallava houses in the Tirunelveli region, they would only have this lamp. And many of them, their surnames would be Nainar. And I suspect that many of them at one point of time would have been Jains, converted into Hindus or reconverted into Hindus, but they still preserve that old tradition of worshipping only the lamp. And very uniquely, this lamp will have only 4 faces, not 5, like in other parts of Tamil Nadu, only 4. Of course, these things have changed now. On the other side is this rather modern looking Jain monastery and school in Tiru Malai. Again, very sad that now a lot of people from the north are funding them, but they're not building the buildings in the traditional Tamil way. So my hope is through this lecture, that word also goes around. So these are a few things that I wanted to share about Tamil Jainism. Like I said, I'm not an expert on this topic. I am not a practicing Jain. There are great scholars and giants who've come before me. I hope I have not made any mistakes. I hope if I have, please forgive me for that. If I have been able to convey to you a sense of contribution and grandeur of what the Jains did in Tamil Nadu, that is also not because of me. It is because of great scholars like Uvesa. It's because of the great people who preserved these stories, preserved these epics, preserved these places, kept them intact for us to see them today. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
Thank you, sir. I think Ocean will take on from here.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you very much, sir, for this enlightening lecture. It was a great amalgamation and an academic output of multiple analysis of textual tradition along with the artistic evaluation that you did very nicely and in a very lucid language that even the people who do not belong to the region and are not much aware of the Jain heritage in the form of tangible and intangible evidences, you have weaved them very beautifully, sir. We have some questions already which have reached to us individually, and I would like to read some of these questions. And when you were actually talking and you were delivering the lecture, there was so much of a discussion which was also going on in the chat box.
Yes,
So
yes, I'm just
I
noticing
think,
all that. So Dr.
yes,
Rajit Das, of course, is sharing his wisdom, which is very good.
absolutely.
Excellent. So maybe you should just save these chats and send it out to everybody. I think you can
Yes,
put a whole
sure,
book out
sir.
of this now.
But
Oh, I got to say, so one
very
thing that's really appreciable now, I'm told that Sri Rajendra Prasad is a Tamil Jain, very, very passionate Tamil Jain. He is now on the minorities board in Tamil Nadu. So for the first time, there is a Tamil Jain on the minorities board, and one hopes that all of you will support him to one is to conserve Jain monuments, but also see what you can do to uplift the Tamil Jain community.
Yes, thank you very much. I would read the the first recent news headlines extensively covered the purpose of tungsten
I think you're breaking up.
Ocean, your voice is breaking.
Okay. Okay. Recently, news headlines extensively covered the proposal of tungsten mining in Arithapatti near Madurai, which posed a significant threat to some of the very important heritage sites, including Jain caves, beds, and sculptures. Thankfully, the proposal has been revoked after extensive protests. This incident highlights a major threat that our heritage face every day from encroachment and neglect. What can be done by us, the common citizens, to participate in heritage conservation? That is the first question, sir.
So people have to go and visit these sites. Once you visit those sites, go talk to the locals, tell them how proud you are that they're looking after the place. The locals have to get a sense of pride to say, yeah, if there's somebody coming all the way from Bombay or Delhi or London or wherever, and they're coming all the way to see this place, okay, so I have to look after it. That's what you could do. I think Rajendra Prasad ji is on this presentation today. Please reach out to him separately and see what can be done. Like I said earlier on, my request is please don't bring in North Indian styles of construction and design elements into these places. Keep the purity, preserve the purity. And definitely, I think younger people who are Jains have to work with Tamil scholars to look at how you can take Jain works to social media.
Yes, thank you very much, sir. The next question is, are the present day Tamil Jain temples possessing important medieval period copied manuscripts? And if they are there, any specific observations about the information on the people who were commissioning them or writing or donating them?
I know Karnataka monasteries have a big tradition of this. I am not aware of any Tamil monasteries which have this. I'm not very sure. The one that I would think may have something is Tiru Malai, because all the other ones that I've covered are all either ASI monuments or they're really small cave temples. So very unlikely any of them will have. If something should be there, it should be with Tiru Malai. I've been there once, but I've not seen. I think Shobha ji is on the call. Shobha Vartman is on the call. She helped me with that Tiru Malai connection, but I'm not sure whether they have any. But it'll be a wonderful thing to do that separately. If there are illustrated manuscripts, in the old days of antique collecting, I used to sometimes see in dealer shops uh, Jain paintings, tiny paintings from the Mysore style, from that Kongunadu, that region. I don't see those anymore. Those don't come up for sale also these days. Small ones, they'll be about 10 inches by 10 inches. Tirthankara, there'll be a Tirtha image or something like that. Don't see those anymore. So I'm sure there was a painting tradition as well in Tamil Nadu.
Thank you, sir. The next question is, can you please explain about the Jain rock cut beds in Tamil Nadu and if possible, show any visuals? That is one of the questions in the chat box. Also.
Oh, I haven't put a picture of that. But yeah, so rock cut beds are basically, we would believe when the Jain monk does the Salekana vow, they probably were excavated for that. And these beds are valuable for historians because usually there will be the name of the monk for whom it's excavated, who excavated it for them, and what trade they did. And because of that, we know, for example, Aragar Malai has some of the largest number of these kind of rock beds. We know salt merchants or textile merchants, they were the ones who funded this. So that's why rock beds are important. I'm sure if that listener just Googles rock beds in Tamil Nadu, they'll be able to find a picture on. It's basically a the rock has been flattened out, and there's a small headrest for the Jain monk to keep his head.
Sir, they are for during Chaturmas, during 4 months of rainy season, the ascetics, they come and stay and go out periodically. Right. That is meant for that only.
Meant for that. Thank
you,
sir.
It is not for Salegana stone.
Okay, thank you for that.
Every year they come in batches, stay for 4 months, they move to other place.
And presumably that's why they're inside a cave and relatively difficult to access also.
And they deliver sermons and things there at the 4 months. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr.
Wonderful talk.
So Shobha ma'am just wants to correct me, and thank you for that. That Saleka, that the ma'am, I think you should just say it yourself in your own words. It'll be more articulate. Okay, I think basically what you were saying was the same point, that Salekana stones are different. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Pradeep. That was a nice talk. For a non-Jain, I think you covered everything quite extensively.
Thank you,
in a very humble manner. And the rock beds are the places where, and in those days, the monks used to live in an isolated place, far away from the towns, and they prefer to live in places where they will not be disturbed in their meditation by others. So, and since their requirements are very less, and they used to lie on the floor, these the rock floors are smoothened down to make the rock beds for them. You will find some of them in close contact in places where there had been pallis also. and in rock formations where there are separate enclosures and these rock beds are there. The Salekana stones are more or less long, tall, narrow stones standing upwards, where they will give the details about Salekana, who has taken it, and who was the king at that time, and other details like that, and who was the teacher of that person who is taking the Salekana. These kind of details will be given in these Salekana stones, and they are
And
generally vertical standing stones, not horizontal lying beds actually.
Okay, and that's an interesting point that you bring up, because this tradition of erecting a vertical stone to commemorate the passing away of somebody is a prehistoric tradition. So even before writing came in, again, you go to places like Erode, you will see, I mean, many of you who've read Asterix and Obelix will know Obelix is always making these obelisks. And we have those in Tamil Nadu as well. Erode and all, you don't have singular pillar-shaped stones. You have slabs of stone erected. In Karnataka, prehistoric times, they used to erect pillar-shaped stones. So this is an older, much older tradition also that the Jains also followed. Interesting. Thank you for that, ma'am.
And they are generally called Nishidi stones. Nishidi.
Okay. Nishidi.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shobha ma'am, for the insights. We'll take this last question. And one of the participants has asked, there seems to be fewer discourses on the socio-political anthropological research on Jainism, Jain polity in the South, and especially Tamil Nadu. Can you please shed light on the possible reasons and the scope for the further research?
Gosh, I don't understand that question. Sorry.
The question has been asked by Kirthi MS. And he says that there are very fewer discourses on the socio-political anthropological research on Jainism. So overall, he's probably saying that there are very less researches on the multidimensional and interdisciplinary researches related to Jainism of the state of Tamil Nadu.
There are some good books in Tamil, and there are older books that have done a fairly good job in listing down all the Tamil Jain sites. And the controversies between the Shaivites, Vaishnavites, and Jainism, there have been essays written about it. I don't know whether there's a book about it. But see, there's a problem in this, because in a way, a lot of what we know of Jains in the medieval times is actually because, and that too, Tirunjana Sambandar and all went hammer and tongs against the Jains. In his 11th, every one of his 11th verse is something that he pans the Jains and the Buddhists. So because of that only we know what they did. Otherwise, we don't know much. Buddhists, we don't know anything at all. Jains, we have some pieces of information like this only because of this. So we've done some work on this. So there's some articles that have been written about it. Books, not so much. But I think, yeah, that could be a good space for people to do some work on. In fact, it will be lovely to see one holistic map of coffee table book kind of thing of Jain sites in Tamil Nadu. But I'm really scared of something like this, because this is the way people will start going, and then they'll cover up the. I mean, imagine that Mangalam, when I used to go earlier on, it wasn't concrete steps like this. It was actually tough to climb it, and somehow I think in India the tragedy is we're all very eager to make everything available to everybody, and everybody has the right to visit every place. But we forget to tell people that you might have the right to visit every place, but you also have a duty on how you behave over there. And the minute, and I'm very sure Chitral and all is very difficult to get to. Mangalam is very difficult. I'm sure, Professor Ajit Das is here. He does a lot of these heritage walks. I'm sure if we make it easy for us to access these places, it will be drunkards and womanizers who will go there first, rather than historians and Jain scholars. So sometimes I feel it's better that some of these places are remote and they stay that way. Ainar Kulam, I mean, it was that video that I showed you. I went there. Just in fact, in a way, I think it was like all the Jain arhats pushing me to do this talk, because I was delaying it for a long time, and I didn't know about this in my own place, and I was traveling to Seran Mahadevi. I saw that boat and I said, hey, what the hell is this boat doing here? And then I went in and saw, and there was this completely desolate that INR Kulam is, and I hope it stays that way. So I don't know, this development is at a cost. We just have to be careful.
Thank you
Yes,
very
two
much,
of my
sir.
Jain
In
gurus
fact,
they've raised their hands, so let's give them a chance to talk.
Sir, you should have told something about Tamil Brahmi inscriptions. 90%
Sir,
of the
I
Tamil
have
Brahmins
only
are
1 hour to do. That's a definite separate topic that we should do at some point in time. Fair point, sir. Shobha ma'am, you wanted to say something?
I just wanted to tell you that the University of Madras and the tourism department of Tamil Nadu, they are doing this mapping for all the religious places in Tamil Nadu. And
Okay.
Mrs. Vasuki Bahubali has done it for very, very meticulously. Every place, almost all the desolate places also she's been to, and she's mapped it. And very soon the
Wonderful.
report will be coming, and that's something that we can look forward to.
Yes.
And there is another thing that the Alliance Francaise brought out 430 images of Jain relics in Tamil Nadu, and they have produced a CD.
Wonderful.
Nalini Balbir and others, and that all, if anybody is interested, they can ask Alliance Francaise and get that information. Nowadays, CDs are not used in our, there's not even a place in the computer. Probably they put it
Yeah.
on a USB key and they can give it to you actually.
So anyway, all
I
of this,
just
thank you, ma'am. Well, Shri Rajendra Prasad Jain is the State Minorities Commission member, Government of Tamil Nadu. I think he's on this call. So he's got a lot of good ideas now. But I just, one more time, I'm just going to tell everybody, popularizing Jain sites, and indeed any, especially Jain sites, because they're in remote places, it's a double-edged sword, because it can be messed up very quickly, and then we lose the whole connection with the nature, with the wildlife over there. So whatever is done, I hope it's done in a way that doesn't alter the old spiritual sanctity. I'm not saying the new, but the old spiritual sanctity.
thank you very much, sir.
Yes, most welcome.
Someone has raised a doubt that they request us to create a WhatsApp channel. There is already a WhatsApp channel, and my friend Saurabh would definitely be happy to post the link here in the chat box. Before I give it to Saurabh to propose a formal vote of thanks, I would like to mention the efforts put in by Saurabh and Soumya for organizing these sessions, where we bring in many of the scholars and make their talks available, their academic talks available to the commoners as well, thereby not just raising awareness amongst the Jain population, but also amongst the commoners, not just about the Jain heritage, but about the heritage of this land and of this humankind. So thank you so much, Saurabh and Soumya, for these efforts. And now give
I
it
must
to
say,
Saurabh.
Saurabh was very, very persistent. I was very reluctant to do this talk because I'm not a practicing Jain. I, of course, anytime there is this board that I see, I make it a point to go to that place because it's so calm and quiet, and I sit and meditate for some time. But Saurabh was really persistent, and I'm glad he did what he did. And I'm glad INR Kulam really jostled me up and made me do this. So thank you for that. Thank you, Saurabh, especially.
I request Saurabh to propose a formal vote of thanks.
Thank you so much, Oshin. And I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Pradeep Chakravarthy for graciously accepting our invitation today and delivering such an insightful presentation on the Jain legacy of Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu is the land rich in history with its extensive temple complexes, intricate rituals, and powerful royal dynasties that offered patronage to various religious sects, including those of the Jains, enabling them to create remarkable artistic and literary works. As we have witnessed today, Dr. Chakravarti, with his deep knowledge and engaging delivery, has illuminated an important chapter of Jainism's history in Tamil Nadu. We are confident that this session will be instrumental in spreading awareness about the art, literature, and history of Jainism in Tamil Nadu. It is our hope that this will inspire us all to contribute towards preserving and conserving our shared cultural heritage, which continues to captivate us. We are also grateful to the scholars who are in attendance today, who are dedicated to the study of Indian culture and heritage. We have been informed that Mr. Rajendra Prasad Jain, the State Minorities Commission member in the government of Tamil Nadu, has joined us today, and we thank him for his time. And to the audience member who have joined us today in overwhelming numbers, thank you very much for your time today. I trust you that you have gained some deep insight, some new insight and knowledge from this session. Thank you everyone once again. Jai Jinendra. Thank you.